our studios in New York City, this is Charlie Rose.
We are in Omaha, Nebraska for a conversation with Warren Buffett. Like so many people, I got up this morning in New York and read the New York Times editorial page, and I found the following column written by him. It is an op-ed which is called Stop Coddling the Super Rich. Here are some excerpts. Our leaders have asked for shared sacrifice, but when they did the asking, they spared me. I checked with my mega-rich friends to learn what pain they were expecting. They, too, were left untouched. While the poor and middle class fight for us in Afghanistan, and while most Americans struggle to make ends meet, we mega-rich continue to get our extraordinary tax breaks. Buffett speaks directly to the newly designated 12-member Supercommittee of Congress, outlining the stakes for the country. Americans are rapidly losing faith in the ability of Congress to deal with our country's fiscal problems. Only action that is immediate, real, and very substantial will prevent that doubt from morphing into hopelessness. That feeling can create its own reality. He spoke to spending as well as taxes, saying, "Job one for the 12 is to pare down some future promises that even a rich America can't fulfill. Big money must be saved here." And then he turned to his theme of taxes on the rich. The 12 should then turn to the issue of revenues. I would leave rates for 99.7% of taxpayers unchanged and continue the current 2 percentage point reduction in the employee contribution to the payroll tax. His argument is specific. For those making more than $1 million, there were 236,883 of them in 2009. I would raise rates immediately on taxable income in excess of $1 million, including, of course, dividends and capital gains. And for those who make $10 million or more, there were 8,274 in 2009. I would suggest an additional increase in rate. So there it is. At a time of great political debate about taxes and spending, one of the richest people in the world looks at his country and says, people like him should pay more taxes. Warren Buffett joins me now to talk about this column, the U.S. economy, the global economy, the deficit and the debt, and what he thinks we should do about taxes. I am pleased to have another conversation with my friend Warren Buffett. Welcome.
Good to see you, Charlie.
All right, this is not a new idea for you.
No, it's not a new idea. I've done this 3 times in terms of checking in my office, and every time I come out to be the low taxpayer, but this time I got a little more upset than usual.
So you got more upset and decided you wanted to write and express what central idea?
Well, we've been hearing about shared sacrifice, and believe me, the people out there know what they're talking about on that. I mean, there is sacrifice going on all over this country, and we're talking about people making sacrifices about the promises that have been made to them in the future on some entitlements. So I decided to look around and see if any of my friends were being affected by shared sacrifice, and they, like me, are enjoying these extremely low tax rates, and in the very high percentage of the cases, the very rich are paying less in the way of taxes than the people to clean their offices.
Between a 10-year period, and the rich, the rate they were paying has gone down, and more of them have much larger taxable income.
Yeah, well, the IRS publishes statistics. They've done that since 1992 about the top 400 earners in the country. It's not the same every year. Those earners have had their income since 1992 quintupled. Now, I don't know very many of our listeners that are going to have had their earnings quintupled. During that same period, their tax rates have gone down from 29.5% overall to 21.5%.
You're also in favor of spending cuts.
We have to, Charlie. I mean, we are a very, very, very rich country. We've got close to, $48,000 of GDP per capita. If you'd told me when I was a kid that would happen, I would have thought you'd lost your marbles. But even a rich country has limits, and we have promised things that we can't deliver on, and that's a mistake. But we're also in the process undertaxing the very rich. What I propose, incidentally, would not touch the taxes of 99.7%. I'm talking about 0.3% of the American public. But the people from $1 million on up, I think, should be asked to share in a little of the sacrifice that we're all being asked to share.
What's the formula you're looking for?
Well, I think what really gives the low rates to the very rich like me is the low tax on dividends and capital gains. If you take these rich people that the IRS singles out from 1992, they've almost had a tenfold increase in capital gains. They've had a tenfold increase almost in dividends. And those are taxed at 15%. And there's no payroll tax on it. Now, the payroll tax accounts for almost as much revenue to the government as the income tax. It's close. 800 billion plus on payroll taxes last year and about 900 billion on income taxes. That's where the money comes from in Washington. And they don't get any payroll tax to speak of on my income. I've got my tax return here.
We're going to take a look at them in a moment.
and I get taxed on up to 100,000, and my super rich friends get taxed up to 100,000, and that tax hits the people in my office very, very hard. Often they have a spouse working, so they get taxed on up to $200,000, that payroll tax, and that's at. This year we've had a waiver of 2 points, but that's normally at 15.3%. That alone is higher than the tax rate on capital gains or dividends.
You point out that the average tax rate for people in your audience, the average rate for people in your office is 36% of taxable income. 36%,
and nobody's below 33%. And incidentally, the lowest income person in the office is higher than the 33. They don't have the low rate. So from 33 to 41 they range, and they average 36. And I'm in there with a fat 17.4, I think it is.
And why is that?
Well, it taxes. If you make money with money, you get taxed at very low rates, 15% dividends and capital gains, no payroll tax. If you make money with muscle or hard work or sweat of your brow, you get taxed at rates that move on up. And most of the people, the middle class, gets taxed at rates of either 15 or 25 on their income tax, but then they get really hit hard on the payroll tax, and that's what brings the rates in our office up to an average of 36% if you leave me out.
What has happened to the tax rate for the lowest 20%?
The poor don't pay any. I mean, there's 80 plus million actual taxpayers that pay tax. Incidentally, some of the extremely wealthy don't pay, but that's an aberration. But no, the taxes are falling. The high rates are falling on the middle class and the upper middle class.
The argument is sometimes made by people who believe that it is always good economic policy to reduce taxes, that if in fact you reduce taxes, you will create economic expansion and economic growth. People will go out and create jobs if they're not paying as much tax. People, if they're paying a higher tax, will not make as many investments.
Well, I worked with investors for 60 years, small ones, large ones, super large ones. Yeah. I have yet, and I've worked with capital gains rates of 39.9% and 36% and 25%. I have yet to hear one person say to me, if I call you in the middle of the night, Charlie, and I say, Charlie, I've got this hot investment idea, your reaction is not to say, no matter what the tax rate, forget it, I'm going back to sleep because the capital gains rates are too high. No, what you're going to do is you're going to say, tell me the name quick, Warren, before I change your mind. You know? And I have never had one person decline to invest with me. And I was running money 40, 50 years ago when rates were much higher. And I never had one person that showed the slightest reluctance to take an investment idea and run with it.
What are the other reasons that is essential to do now?
Well, I think it is essential. I think people are very, very upset about how their government works, and particularly how it worked during this raising the deficit ceiling period. I mean, so as I talk to people, they're very disillusioned. Howard Schultz of Starbucks came out with an article just the other day on that. So I think it's important that whatever is done restores to a degree, and can't do it overnight, but restores to a degree people's faith in the fact that their government can work. Now, I also think fairness is important, and I think getting rid of promises that you can't keep is important. I don't think we should cut spending dramatically now. I don't think that what I'm talking about on taxes solves the deficit gap at all. But I think fairness is important. I think having a sensible long-term plan is important to explain, and I think having it be believable is terribly important, because people don't believe these out-year things generally with Congress. They've seen too much of what's happened.
Is part of this, being in the position that you're in, you want to start a conversation about the reality of taxes?
Sure.
And the reality of balance and fairness?
Yeah, I think the American people deserve to be educated unless fellows like me are paying in taxes, for example. But they have to be educated on the reality of future promises. They have to be educated on the necessity of running significant deficits when the economy is weak. I mean, there's a lot of things in terms of economic education. But this is the time to do it. If we don't do it now, if these 12 members who have been appointed now to the super committee, if they come back with something that's a lot of mush, you know, the American public's had it.
And what happens to the country?
It isn't good. It isn't good. The country will still come through. Believe me, we'll rise to whatever occasion the occasion demands eventually. But we are wasting so much in the way of potential output in terms of the opportunities for people that we ought to get on with it. I mean, the job of government is to govern.
Let me go to the debt ceiling debate and just talk about it for a moment.
It's just like, let's just say, Charlie, that you and I agreed that after we left the studio here, we were going to go out to a track near here, and I was going to get at one end with my car, and you're going to get at the other end, and there's this line down the middle, and whichever one flinches loses his net worth to the other guy. Do you want to play?
Yeah.
Whether you want to play depends on how crazy you think I am.
Yeah.
So what do we do if we go out there? Your net worth's on the line, my net worth's on the line, the engines are revved up, you know. And I make all these menacing gestures at you. I try to look like a
You make me think you're crazy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you're trying to make me think you're crazy. And we both get in our cars and we don't think the other guy's crazy.
Yeah.
So what do? Yeah. Right as the engines start, I throw out my steering wheel. Now you believe me, right? Well, Boehner didn't throw out the steering wheel. McConnell didn't throw out the steering wheel. But a group behind them said, throw out the steering wheel, Mr. Speaker, and make those people realize that we're not going to agree to anything that, you know, unless we get our way. And if you have a sane person dealing with somebody that you feel may be insane, by the point that when they throw out the steering wheel, you feel they're insane, you lose. And the American people lost, incidentally.
Then along came Standard & Poor's and basically downgraded.
Yeah.
Because they said it appears that the U.S. Congress is dysfunctional and unable to deal with the issue. Yeah. You disagree with the downgrading?
100%. I mean,
but you understand why they made the decision?
I understand why they did it. But I will bet you McGraw-Hill owns Standard & Poor's.
Right.
I'll bet you if they have any short-term money around, it's in treasuries. I don't know that for sure, but they would not be worried about it that being in treasuries.
And that's, in fact, what happened. Treasuries
are strong.
Right.
We can print money. You know, there's 17 countries in Europe that gave up the right to print money, and believe me, they know what it means to give up the right to print money.
Because they joined the Eurozone.
Yeah, they joined the Eurozone, and now they've got terrible problems because they can't print money. We can print money. So we don't have to worry so much about our government becoming dysfunctional as we have to worry about that damn printing press becoming dysfunctional for some reason.
In fact, you were saying that the United States can always pay its bills, and therefore it should not have had its AAA rating downgraded.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. But what do you make of the Chinese criticism?
Well, I'm sure they're enjoying it in a way. Yeah. I mean, well, I would criticize too, because if I were the Chinese sitting with $1 trillion plus of U.S. government obligations one way or another, I would be very worried about what's going to happen to the purchasing power of that. I mean, I've got the right to get the $1 trillion back, and I will get the $1 trillion back. The question is what will it buy at that time? And our government gives you the impression at times that they will resort to a printing press. They'll resort to a printing press if necessary. And if they do enough of that, the value of the dollar goes down, and it goes down significantly. So if you hold a lot of dollars, which the Chinese do, I can see getting very unhappy about that.
What do you think of the Federal Reserve's announcement they're going to keep interest rates low?
Well, that's a very, very stark statement. I mean, the Fed is saying, when they say we're going to keep rates low until 2013, that they say they're really saying the economy's not going to be very good until then. It's an unusual statement.
Which you disagree with?
I think there's